The coronavirus has forced the permanent closure of more than 100,000 restaurants across the United States. According to the National Restaurant Association, the closures represent nearly 17% of all restaurants in the country. Now in 2021, surviving establishments are at risk of another major wave of potential long-term shutdowns. A new CBS News article titled, "Will Restaurants Survive Winter with New Loans from U.S. Government?" looks at how restaurant owners continue to struggle, even with help from government loan programs. Megan Cerullo, CBS MoneyWatch reporter and writer of this article, joins me now. Megan, such an important conversation. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jamie.
So the newest iteration of the Paycheck loan program has a special provision for independent restaurants. Can you help break down what this means for struggling restaurants right now?
Restaurants are indeed struggling, like you said. About 17% of independent restaurants across the country have already closed. That's almost 1 in 6. And what's new about this new program is that restaurants, unlike other small businesses, are entitled to loans that are worth up to 3.5 times their average monthly payrolls, whereas other businesses are entitled to loans worth up to only 2.5 times their average monthly payrolls. So there's some recognition that restaurants are really struggling, but they still say that this isn't enough to help them get through.
Well, I know some restaurant owners fearing that even the lenient terms may not be enough to keep them afloat. Why are restaurants still struggling? Obviously, we know many places you can't indoor dine. You just can't get, you can't get the business back right now. But why are these loans specifically not helping?
A lot of small restaurants have small staffs. They employ a dozen or even fewer employees. So the amount of that loan is not going to be very, very big. And also, as its name indicates, it's a paycheck protection loan. It's designed to protect employees' wages. And while that's laudable and while that's really important to restaurant owners, it leaves little on the table for them. This program was not designed to ensure the long-term viability of these businesses.
So I'm looking at the numbers here. It looks like under the new provision, restaurants have to spend about 60% of the loan on payroll to have it forgiven. Some owners say that's not going to be easy. Is that what you're saying, is because the staffs are the size that they are?
It's tough for restaurants because the last thing they want to do is take on more debt. So they're going to try to do everything they can to ensure that these loans can be forgiven, which means spending 60% of the loan on their employees' wages. And given that there are all these restrictions in almost every city and state across the country, they're not open at full capacity. A lot of restaurants are shut down for indoor dining, and outdoor dining isn't as palatable this time of year. In Colorado, there's a lot of snow, for example. So they don't necessarily have jobs for these workers to do. So it doesn't make sense for them to bring back their full staffs. Instead, they'd rather rent relief or direct cash infusions. That's why it's tricky for them. And restaurateurs aren't on their own payrolls, so they're not taking home any money at the end of the day, end of the year.
It's so tough. Let's talk about the Restaurants Act, which industry leaders are lobbying Congress to pass. Can you explain for us what this proposed legislation could actually do for restaurants?
Sure. It's a bipartisan piece of legislation. It's a $120 billion restaurant revitalization fund, and it would provide restaurants with direct grants. And they say that this is really what is going to help them survive. It'll make or break restaurants, and they'll be eligible to grants worth that are calculated based on the difference in their revenues in 2019 versus 2020. And that's what they say is going to help. And I talked to one restaurant owner, Naomi Pomeroy, who's a James Beard Award winner, and said that if we want to have our post-pandemic celebrations at independent restaurants, not only at big chain restaurants, we need the Restaurants Act to pass.
I think there's a fear really amongst people that think that there's only going to be fast food left or like really high-end dining at this point. And we do want to have the celebrations with those independent restaurants. So many people want to support, but unless something's done, I mean, so many people are hurting.
That's right. And restaurant owners almost unanimously say that the Restaurants Act is their key to survival and are hopeful that it will pass.
Well, they know. So hopefully Congress is listening. Megan Cerullo, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jamie.